In the spring of 1803, the United States finalized a secret transaction that doubled the country's landmass overnight for less than 4 cents an acre. This massive acquisition wasn't the result of a military campaign. It was triggered by a bankrupt French emperor and a slave revolt on a Caribbean island thousands of miles away. This collision of global events shifted the trajectory of the North American continent without the United States firing a single shot. By 1800, the United States remained a vulnerable coastal republic, its western border ending abruptly at the Mississippi River. For the growing number of American farmers in the West, the port of New Orleans was their only link to the global economy. Every barrel of flour and crate of tobacco had to pass through this single point to reach the sea. When Skanes secretly signed over control of this territory to a resurgent, aggressive France, the news sent shockwaves through Washington. If France chose to close the port, they could effectively paralyze the American economy and halt westward migration by cutting off the river entirely. Napoleon Bonaparte intended to use the Louisiana Territory as a massive granary to feed a new French empire in the Western Hemisphere. The center of this plan was Saint-Domingue, France's most profitable colony, which relied on the labor of 500,000 enslaved people to produce sugar and coffee. That imperial dream collapsed when the enslaved population overthrew air oppressors. In the only successful slave revolt of its kind, they defeated the French and established the independent nation of Haiti. Napoleon sent his finest troops to retake the island, but they were decimated. Tens of thousands of soldiers died in the fighting or from yellow fever. Without the wealth of Saint-Domingue to protect, the Louisiana Territory became a strategic liability that France could no longer afford to defend. Scrambling to fund a new war against Great Britain, Napoleon decided to liquidate his American holdings in a massive fire sale. American diplomats had gone to Paris authorized to spend $10 million just for New Orleans. They were stunned when the French offered the entire territory, over 800,000 square miles, for only $15 million. This map shows the deal: land for 15 future states, purchased for 3 cents an acre. However, this created a legal crisis for Jefferson. He knew the Constitution granted no explicit power to purchase foreign land. Jefferson agonized over the decision, fearing he was overstepping his executive authority. But he ultimately decided the opportunity to secure the Mississippi was too vital to ignore. These signatures on the final treaty represent a moment where Jefferson abandoned his core political philosophy for the sake of geographic necessity. To understand what they had actually bought, the government commissioned Lewis and Clark to map the rivers and mountains of the new American West. However, the newly purchased land was not empty. As this encampment shows, the territory was already the home of dozens of nations, from the Sioux and Cheyenne to the Osage and Comanche. For these indigenous peoples, the purchase in Paris was the beginning of a century defined by broken treaties and forced removal from their ancestral lands. The new land also forced a confrontation over slavery. As populations moved west, the North and South fought for control over whether new territories would be slave or free. This friction created a divide that could not be reconciled through legislation, pushing the nation directly toward the Civil War. The 1803 treaty transformed a coastal union into a continental power, but that growth was fueled by the displacement of native nations and a domestic conflict that would eventually turn the country against itself.